Welcome to the Dad Nation podcast, where men go from good to great in their life and love. Now more than ever, our world needs strong, courageous, and compassionate men, because we believe that when the dad gets better, the whole family wins. Now, this movement is called Dad Nation, but ultimately this is for the wives, the children, and the generations to come, because we also believe that every wife and child deserves a father who is pursuing greatness. I am your host, Mitchell Osmond, and I am so grateful and I'm humbled that you've chosen to spend your most precious resource, which is your time, with me today. Listen, today we've got another incredible episode for you, so let's get into it. Welcome to the Dad Nation podcast. If you're listening, boy, you are in for a treat today. We have my wonderful, beautiful, spectacular bride, my wife, Samantha Rachel Osmond, with me today, and we are talking about marriage. We're talking about all the good stuff. Talking about money, talking about fighting, conflict, tons and tons of stuff. So, welcome to the show, Sam.
Thank you.
Good to have you here. I was just telling her before we started, this is the first time I've ever actually been with a person in the same room recording, because most of mine are remote recordings with other guys on the other side of the world, other side of the country. So glad to be just doing this here at home base with my wife. This is fun. So you asked, and we are going to answer.
Hold on. Just let everybody know that this is my first time ever being on a podcast. So please just have amples of grace for me, because I have no idea what it is to be a guest on a podcast.
But you have wisdom for days.
Wow, that's nice.
Wisdom for days.
Thanks.
Okay. So we have, if you're watching on YouTube, we have this baby monitor right in here that we may have to run up at any point, because our boy is having a nap right now. So if you just randomly hear the podcast cut out, that's what's going on. So anyways, here we are. So we're going to give you whatever we can with the time that we have, which is looking about to be 45 minutes. So we're just going to jump right in, you guys. So the first question that was asked to us was, what does work-life balance look like for you both, and how did you get there? How did you get there to achieving work-life balance? Now, I feel like I have a lot to say about this. For me, work-life balance is it can be tricky, and I struggle with the word balance, because balance implies that things are in equilibrium and that they're static and they don't change, right? But realistically, no day is the same, no week is the same, no month is the same. So the idea of establishing some sort of permanent harmony, I don't know. I mean, I've yet to figure it out. But one thing that I have done in the past is just becoming very, very clear on what gets my yes, right? So I know exactly what gets my automatic yeses. And when I know what gets my yes, it's so much easier to know what gets my no's, because we can totally lose ourselves in a sea of things that are great. But especially the busier you get with kids and career and all those different things, you can burn out just doing all good things. But what you'll get to a point where you have to decide for yourself, what is the best thing for me personally? What is the best thing for our relationship? And so for me, I'm always asking myself that question. And it could be if we're going out, if I want to go out with a friend for coffee, or, take on this extra commitment or whatever. And I'm like, is this just a good thing that I'd like to do? Or is this the best thing for me to do for my time? And so that's one thing. That's just a filter that I use personally. And then Sam, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do personally? And then we'll hit the marriage component.
I think that for me, it's, as an individual, I like, unlike you, I like the word balance, because I feel like for me, like the original definition of balance would mean that everything is kind of like equal. So I like to take care of myself as much as I take care of my relationships, as much as I take care of my, everything. So my body, my mind, my marriage, my relationship with my kid, with work, with community, all of that for me, I like to have in balance. And for me, everybody's different. So you have to know what your own, you have to be more self-aware to know like when is it too much in one area versus another, and do the things that you need to do to make I would say that it's very personal. Like I just don't think that like one size fits all, but I think you'll know. You'll be completely wiped if you're not in balance with work and life, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. What's life giving and what's life draining? And as a person, as a woman, as a man, as a father, as a mother, as a husband, as a wife, you have to be well aware of what those things are and how they drain you, or if they don't drain you, kind of like what I was talking about. I think as for a couple, excuse me, it's just different for every single couple, because each couple has their own sort of capacity, and so some couples just love to run, at a high speed. Some couples love to just keep it chill, keep it low key, and not have busy schedules, and that works for them. And so I think the key in that is communication. What you don't want is growing bitter because your spouse is going so hard and that you're not, or you're going so hard and your spouse isn't. And then bitterness.
We've never been there. You've never gone so so all in that.
We've never had that conversation before.
Never.
So I think it's just so important to have that conversation with your spouse and to always be asking that question. Like, how are you feeling? How am I feeling? Are you happy? And that was actually one of the most profound things. One of our therapists we were seeing at one time just said, because we were asking them a question. I can't remember what it was about, but it was something along the lines of this. And he said, just ask each other, are you happy? Sam, are you happy? Yeah. Well, Mitch, are you happy? Yeah. Well, if you're both happy, who cares? Who cares what everyone else is doing? Because everyone else has different capacities. Everyone else has different values and passions and perspectives. And so you have to just ask one another. That's it. And if you both are happy with the pace of life and what you guys are up to, then you're good. Forget about what everyone else is doing and how they're doing it.
Yeah, I was thinking before you started all that it's just whatever makes everybody's needs met in your family. So if your needs are met, my needs are met, our son's needs are met, we can't leave out our dog, our beautiful dog, Cash, his needs are met, then those most important relationships, if their needs are met, then you're good. I guess that's...
Yeah, I think that's fine. I mean, we have had I know we're joking about it, but we've had a big struggle with that over our marriage, almost 10 years of marriage. It's because I'm the guy who I'll just work till my legs fall off. It's just the way it is. And I love it. Sam is not necessarily the same way. She's not wired the same way. And she's actually, we have different core values, which we can talk about at a different show or different episode maybe. But I walk through my clients through a core values assessment. And so that's a big thing, understanding your core values and how you're wired. One of my biggest values is like, is goals, accomplishments, things like that, right? Career. And so hers are more around relationship, nurturing, emotional support, those different things, right? And so naturally, I'm going to be wired to put those goals and career things, accomplishments first, and she's going to put relationships first and some of those things first. And if you don't understand your core, what are we talking about? Your core values, yeah, and you're going to clash here. This is a big thing, and this is the fighting that just cuts deep, because you're actually clashing against one another's core values. So that was a lesson we learned early, and it was super valuable.
Learned early, have taken a very long time to try and figure out, and we are not there yet. Right?
We're not there yet.
I don't think we'll ever get there.
Your values change over time too, right? Like when you have kids, you switch careers, and so you got to communicate through that, right? So anything else to add, Sam, before we jump to number 2?
No, I don't think so. Just make sure your spouse is taken care of, you're taking care of yourself, and whoever else is in your family is taken care of. That's it. Communicate the needs, meet the needs.
You're doing great, babe.
Thank you.
Okay, number 2. Sorry, I'm coughing a bunch, you guys. I'm just getting over a cold, which was fun to have over Christmas. But so please bear with me. Number 2, how do you guys make up after a big fight, after having a big fight? Or do you fight? Laugh out loud.
Just like Hollywood says, we have the hottest sex. That's how we make up. Oh, just kidding.
Yeah. False.
Not true. I don't know if we ever have.
We do fight. This is the last thing I want to do after fighting.
It's so true.
Just like,
anyways, everybody's different.
Okay. How do you guys make up? So I have a lot to say about this, but before I jump into it, Sam, do you have any things that you want to share about this question?
How do we make up after having a big fight?
Or any ideas?
I think that like you first need to take time to just cool off. Because if you come back to try and resolve things and make up when you're still frustrated, angry, upset, and your body's just super energized and you're over the top, you won't be able to think through things logically and you won't be able to figure it out and communicate properly. So I would say first things first is to just cool down before you come back together to make up or resolve things.
Yeah. I think that's huge. Usually our bodies will give us physical tells of what's going on the inside. So emotions manifest physically, right? So for example, I start rubbing my hands together. This is a sign. If you're watching YouTube, you see me doing this with my hands. That is like a telltale sign that I'm starting to get worked up. And that could also just be about something I'm passionate about. But if I'm getting frustrated or overwhelmed, that's something that I do. A lot of guys feel like their chest getting buzzy or their head getting hot, literally. There's a lot of different things. They start shaking their legs or, tightening their upper lip. There's a few different things. And if you don't know, ask your spouse. I'm sure they'll be able to tell you what it is you do. So number one is recognizing those physical triggers for me. And again, I'll speak to me
Not
personally.
Not triggers, signs.
Oh, sorry, physical signs. But what Sam was saying is taking space is huge. I think it's just wise. You might have some people who might say, no, I want to figure this out right now. I don't care. We don't need to take space, which actually we're going to get into a little bit later. But what happens when you get overwhelmed is you go into what's called a fight or flight state, right? And your prefrontal cortex, which is the part of your brain that is completely responsible for rational thinking, reasoning, intelligent thought, all those different things, actually literally goes offline, right? So it shuts down. And there have been brain scans done with people who are in the middle of that peak fight or flight state when they're overwhelmed and they're dysregulated emotionally. And the brain scans look identical to someone who is in the middle of having a manic episode, right? So from a neurological perspective, in that moment when you're losing your cool, you have no more ability to rationally think or reason than someone who's literally losing their mind or lost their mind, which is kind of wild when you think about it. So number one, get away from the conflict, right? Take space, like what Sam was saying. Take space, that's super important. The prefrontal cortex on average takes 14 minutes to come back online once you've been activated in that dysregulated state. So what I say is double that, 28 minutes or a half hour. So just say to your spouse, we've said this before, hey, I need to take some time. Can I have a half hour? And then what I used to do was I just walk out and I didn't tell her where I was going or what I was doing. If you're a guy or you're a girl listening to this, do not do that, because if you have somebody who worries or stresses, then when you just sever that relationship or that tie in that moment and you peace out, that's just a recipe to have your spouse start to spiral about where you could be, about what you could be doing. And so we set up a ground rule. It's you can leave, but you tell me where you're going and when you'll be back. And that was the case for us. And so I can leave to take space, but I have to tell her what it looks like for me to do that. So during that time, when you are taking that space, you can practice your breathing. There's something called the 4-7-8 method, which is what I've done in the past, which is you inhale for 4 seconds, you hold that for 7 seconds, and you slowly release it for 8 seconds. And during that time you're away, ask yourself or practice that breathing, right? And that could be a really great thing to do. There is one question that I've asked myself in the past when we've gotten in a fight. I've said, what have I done to contribute to this situation that we're arguing about? However small, however distant, we've both made errors. So I need to find out what my part to play was in this, because it is impossible. It takes two people to fight. It takes two people to have conflict. And so there is a part to play in whatever. You have a role to play in it, right? So genuinely asking yourself that, what role did I have to play in this fight, and how can I own up to it? And then taking that time, taking the space, practice your breathing, and asking yourself that question of practicing honesty and humility has been helpful for me. Do you have anything to add
No,
to
that's
that?
good. That's good. I think that, yeah, it is just to like practice that humility and coming to understand and not be understood. That's like something that I've always strived for in any relationship, but especially in marriage, is to come to conversations wanting to understand and not to be understood. It is important to be understood at the end of the day, but it is more important to understand first where the other person is coming from and what you can do to help whatever it is the disconnect is moving forward. So I think for me, it's as simple as that. It's just, I'm coming here to understand what it is that you need, what's upset you, and what I can do differently to move forward in a better space.
Yeah, that was
with you.
That was one of the first things you asked me. One of the first fights that we had. You had said you're seeking to be understood before you're seeking to understand, and I'd never heard that before, and it changed the way I thought about how to communicate.
Yeah, and everybody wants to be understood. So if you come to the conversation and say, I want to understand you more, you're going to come back and feel cared for because I'm trying to understand you. And just that alone is going to make for a more peaceful conversation, a more productive conversation, rather than me coming at you saying, this is why I'm upset, this is what I need. It's kind of almost coming back to a fight.
Mm-hmm.
So it's counterproductive.
Mm-hmm.
So seek to understand first, not to be understood.
A question that I often ask guys, and I will often ask myself, is, do I want to be right, or do I want peace in my home?
I heard it once. It said, do you want to fight or be nice?
Sure, that works too. But at the end of the day, it is just not worth it. And if you fight tooth and nail to get your way and so that you can win, newsflash, you're still not going to win even though you won the argument, because now your wife is pissed off and nobody, you know what I mean? That victory, or that perceived victory, will not feel like a victory, my friend. Trust me. So do you want to be right, or do you want peace in your home? That's a good question that I've asked myself. That's been super helpful. Last thing that there's a couple things actually I wrote down here on my notes. Avoid like definitive accusational phrases like, you always do this, you always fill in the blank, or you never ... right? It can feel, when you're painting your spouse with a brush like that, it can feel really, I don't know, like you're just making this brush statement about everything that they do.
Yeah, and like 9 times out of 10, it's not true that they are always, always, always whatever you're saying.
Yeah. You love it when I say that.
Love it. I never call you out on it.
So I try my best not to say it, but I think it's if you could take that. So instead of saying, "Well, you," what's an example?
You're always so dramatic.
So if I were to say, "You're always so dramatic,"
I'll think that all of my efforts to try and like not be dramatic are not seen and not appreciated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you could instead of saying that, you could just say like, when you say this thing, when you do this thing or respond this way, I struggle with it because it makes me feel this way, because that is connected to my emotions and how it impacts me, rather than accusing her of just being this over the top dramatic person. And it's singular in this moment when you say this thing, not like you always say this, right? Another thing that we've used in the past, and I think is brilliant, this is Brene Brown, and I want to do this more, But when you come back after having a fight, or maybe even if you can catch it in the moment, the phrase, the story I'm telling myself, right? And so the reason why this is, and I'll explain this, but the reason why it's impacting is because it helps the other person see where the disconnect is. So for example, if she says to me, like, you're never home, or you never make time for us, right? Again, that word never is pretty accusational, but I can come back and say, the story I'm telling myself when you say that I'm never here, or I'm never home, or whatever, is that you think that I'm not providing for you, or that you think that I'm not present, or that I don't care about you. And then she might say, well, that's actually not what I meant at all. I know you love us. I know you care about us. I know you want to be with us, but I struggle when I'm alone, right? And I just love spending time with you, and I want to spend more time with you. When she responds that way, I'm like, whoa, okay, well, that sounds a lot different to me. That just sounds like you just want to hang out with me more. You want me to be around more. You're not telling me that I don't care about you as a wife, or as a mother, or our family. And you could play that out over any scenario. And we've used it in the past, and it's super effective. And you can do that. Like I said, you can catch it in the beginning, or when you come back together, you say, hey, babe, like, when you say this thing, or when you said this thing, the story I told myself was that fill in the blank, right? And that's a really cool tool, a really great tool to be able to like identify exactly the feelings behind the words, because it's often the words that fall short.
It's good. The original question says, how do you guys make up after having a big fight, or do you fight?
Mm-hmm.
Do we fight?
Never.
We fight. We used to fight a lot, like fight, like gloves up fighting. We used to fight all the time.
We didn't know how to fight well.
But now we have conflict, healthier conflict. Rarely do we have like big blowouts or big fights. Still happens, but
we've learned how to fight fair. And I would say conflict is great. And conflict is important. If you're not having conflict in your relationship, it means that A, you're a robot, or B, you're suppressing a need, or you're just not talking about it. And that's just going to last for a certain amount of time. But this whole, happy wife, happy life mentality, I promise you, it's just going to lead to bitterness, resentment, contempt, and a lot of other things. So communicate your needs. Hey, friend, thank you so much for tuning in to the Dad Nation podcast today. And because you're here, I want to give you a free gift for listening. And this is called Igniting Intimacy. 44 questions to ask your wife to connect deeply and spark intimacy. Maybe you're watching this and you just feel like conversation is just growing real boring in your marriage. Or maybe you've heard from your wife that she feels like she's married to a robot, or that we don't ever talk anymore, or you don't talk about how you feel. If you've heard any of these things from your wife, or felt any of these things, you need to download this free gift for you, because listen, the key to connection with your wife is through quality conversation and quality questions. Okay, I promise this will not disappoint. So check out the show notes below on YouTube or whatever streaming platform you're listening on, or you could just head to dadnationco.com/intimacy for that free gift for you, my friend. Okay, let's get back to the episode. Okay, number 3. You ready to go to number 3?
yeah, we got to go faster, I think.
Do you go to bed angry? Well, this one's going to be quick. Do you go to bed angry? And this is a great question. And I find this is just one of those, I guess it's like old adage, don't let the sun go down on your anger, or don't go to bed mad or whatever. And I think, we were talking about this earlier. This comes from Ephesians chapter 4. I looked it up. Chapter 4, 26 to 27. In your anger, do not sin. Do not let the sun go down while you are still angry, and do not give the devil a foothold. If you're listening to this and you're a believer, you read the Bible, then this is largely where a lot of Christians have heard this from. And I think personally, anger isn't a bad thing. It's just anger is a signal, is an emotion, is information. We have to choose what we're going to do with it. But I think that's where it comes from, and a lot of us force ourselves in that and be like, no, we can't go to bed angry. We cannot do that. And the question is, well, why? Who said that? And why is that? I mean, is that a phrase that we can just apply to every single couple? Or is it more nuanced than that, right? So do you have any thoughts about that, Sam?
I mean, I don't want to be like counter Bible, But I think that like in reality, there are times when you are just not going to get to a place of like total resolve in your upset when it's like midnight, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock. Both of you have to get up for work, or you've got kids that you got to get up for, or whatever. Sometimes it's just not realistic to completely get rid of all of those like feelings by the time you go to sleep. And sometimes it really is, especially if you start like arguing at nighttime, sometimes it really is just the best thing for you to sleep, because the longer you go on tired and anticipating how tired you're going to be the next day, and all the things that you need to get up for and be present for, it puts even more pressure on the conversation, and then it goes even more sideways, at least in our experience. So for me personally, and for us, there are times where we go to bed and not everything is completely resolved. I would say that like do your best to resolve things, but if you can't and it's just continuing to like spiral and spiral and spiral and you're not getting anywhere, to just go to sleep and try the next day as soon as you can. I don't know what you think of that.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. When we get into fights, late at night, I'm staring at the clock and I'm like, okay, there's another hour less sleep I'm gonna get. It's another half hour less sleep I'm gonna get, and then I get more and more frustrated, and I get more and more agitated as time goes because I'm just thinking about how exhausted I'm gonna be the next day, and so the farther I go down that rabbit hole, the more unproductive my conversation gets. The more it just doesn't work for us personally. And I think what the key takeaway from this passage is that it's important to resolve conflict as quickly as it makes sense for you. So if it makes more sense to sleep on it, because that's also a saying, sleep on it, right? Then do that. Like, know yourself as a couple. There's no point in just hammering this out just because someone said you should. And so I think there's part of that. Do not let the sun go down while you're still angry. I think it's safe to just say, as timely, like as early as possible, resolve this conflict. And the second part, do not give the devil a foothold, really just implies that you can't allow things to creep into your relationship and so that you're harboring bitterness. Because whether you believe in in God and Satan and all those things, as believers, we believe that Satan can use that in your relationship to twist and tell you lies and things in the middle of that conflict. But even if you don't believe in that, the idea of just holding on to things and not resolving conflict and just harboring bitterness against your spouse, the longer that goes, the more unhealthy you're going to be. And so resolve the conflict as early as you can. It does not have to be before the sun goes down. We've had many a night where conflict didn't get resolved, and we get up and we kind of figure it out whenever we're ready. Right? Yeah. Anything else to add?
No.
All right, let's get to the good one. I know they're all good. I'm looking forward to talking about this one because we actually had a couple questions about it. Number 4, do you guys combine your money or keep it separate? Why or why not? Do you want to go first? Do you want me to go first?
We combine our money. From the day we got married, we put everything into one account, and what he earns and what I earn is the same thing. It's each other's. We don't have separate accounts. We don't have like separate, like this much of my income goes to our bills and then the rest goes for me to spend on whatever I want. It's just all one. And we agree on a budget, and that's it. We keep track. Everything's transparent. Nobody's spending money anywhere that the other person doesn't know about.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think there's a couple.
Also, sorry. Your debt was my debt, and my debt, well, I didn't have any debt, but would have been your debt.
Yeah.
When we got married.
Yeah. When you get married, you inherit everything that comes with that person. Not just their debt or their money, but their emotions, their experiences, their trauma, their family, a lot of that stuff. And so for us, it's like, we're not going to be all in with like the family stuff and your emotions and everything else. And we're going to share it all, but we're not going to share our finances. Right? I believe that our emotions are heavily connected to our money. Right? And we put a lot into that. And so to not share that with my spouse, the person who I have the most intimate, close relationship with, I think is pretty important for me to share that with her. So maybe I'll speak on the relational side of the relational component and then the actual financial component. But I just think in a world that's so self-consuming, so kind of selfish, and everyone's just trying to get theirs. Marriage, the divorce rate in marriage, obviously we know is not great. And so I'm not looking for more ways to separate from my wife. I'm looking for more ways to be together as one in finances and spirit and flesh and mind. And I'm going to take every way that I can, every opportunity I can to be on the same page with her, to share this life together. And so for me, relationally, spiritually, emotionally, physically, mentally, I want to be on the same page, and money is a big part of that. And then number 2 is honestly just logistically and financially. It just makes more sense to be divvying up money, like you pay for this and you pay for this and you pay for the cable, you pay for the cell phone bills, we'll split the mortgage, it's just, I don't know. I mean, I've never done it, but it just sounds so exhausting to me. When we could just say, hey, here's the money, your money, my money, boom, we'll pay it all and we'll, create a life together. That's just the way I've seen it. For us, a way to really sort of mitigate any sort of conflict, we have allowances, right? Where it's like every month I get unquestioned spending and she gets unquestioned spending, a certain amount that I can spend on whatever I want and she can spend on whatever she wants. And I don't ask questions about it and she doesn't ask me questions about it. And it's like a really, really effective tool in our marriage. So many couples I talk with, they get frustrated because they're, if they're sharing money, it's like, well, you bought this. Well, no, if you bought this, then I want to buy this because you spent this much money. Now I should spend this much money. It's just in our nature. It's who we are. It's how we're wired. We're not completely selfless robots. And so a simple strategy that's really helped us to keep us on the same page, to keep us humble and to keep us from fighting about money is to say, hey, I got this much money. You got this much money.
The same amount.
Same amount. And we spend this every month. And it could be, you could spend it on gummy bears for all I care. Yeah.
It's a lot of gummy bears.
It's a lot of gummy bears. So hopefully that helps.
I think that the biggest thing the biggest benefit of sharing finances is that you are building trust with one another deeply, because we hold so tight to our money. I think in the Bible it says I'm terrible with Bible references, but so don't quote me on this, but it says like where your money is, there your heart is also. So to me, that is like a huge thing. We all know that like what we spend our money on is like, we think about it and it's valuable, our relationship with money and where we put it and how we spend it. So we hold it very closely. And so I think that when you can share that with somebody else, like with your spouse, when you can share that, it takes a heck of a lot of trust, but that is trust that you want to have in your marriage. Like you want to have that deep, deep, deep amount of trust, not just with your heart, with your mind, with your body, but with your money. Like, I just think that is so incredibly valuable to have another level of trust that you can have with one another. I think it's a wonderful thing. It's a great thing, and something that a lot of couples are missing out on when they don't have their finances shared.
Yeah, it's huge. It's huge. Of course, we're biased. We're pretty passionate about that, but that's how we do it. And it's in 10 years, it's never, ever served us wrong. It's actually one part of our marriage. I've said this lots. I'm so thankful that we've never fought about money, because that's actually one of the big 5, So consider it if you haven't considered it, I would say. How do you handle, the next question is, how do you handle conversations, discussions, or arguments when one of you has a deeper feelings than the other? When one of you feels emotions on a deeper level and the other one stays on the surface level, how do you navigate that?
It's a huge question.
It's a huge question. Thank you for asking it. We've worked through this extensively in our marriage.
I am the very sensitive, deep feeler. That's what I bring to the relationship. Extremely deep feeling and much more emotional. Though you have expressiveness, but the feelings part, like the deep feelings in conversations and stuff, doesn't always come out. It has gotten better over the years, I would say.
Yeah, that's a really interesting distinction, and I would agree. I'm expressive, not necessarily emotional.
Yeah.
I love that. You've never said that. I think that there are sensitive, intuitive, emotional types, and then there are rational, pragmatic stoics. And those two people usually marry each other. It's just funny how that works. Not always, but and I think the reason why is we're always drawn to someone that has more of where we feel maybe we need to grow in, and that's just a psychological. It's just how we're wired. And the problem is, though, is after a while, when you get married and it's in your face all the time, the thing that drew you to the person ends up becoming the thing that irritates you the most. Like if you listen and you think about your spouse, the things that bother you the most today are probably the things that you love the most when you got engaged, right? It's funny how that happens. But what I would say is you have to understand each other and hear each other out. One of the most impacting things someone said to me early on in our marriage, one of my early mentors said, if Sam is saying, I feel like you don't love me, then she is not being loved. Therefore, you are not loving her. Right? So it's one thing, because I would say, no, I do love you. Look at all the things I'm doing. Yeah, I love you. Of course I love you. Why do you keep saying I don't love you? And so he said, if she's telling you that, like her feelings are her reality. And so, no, you're not loving her. Even though you may feel like you are, but it's not getting through. And so her feelings are her reality, and your feelings are your reality. And it's really important to have that conversation and to come together to one another. And again, seek to understand before seeking to be understood. I think that's, for me, practicing empathy has been, so I'm obviously not necessarily the emotional one in that sense. And I've had to learn how to practice empathy and say, hey, I'm not even going to expect myself to feel as deeply as she will. And that's okay. And she needs to expect that I'm not going to feel things as deeply as she does. But how do you have that conversation about things that matter to you? And I think you have it by just meeting each other where you're at, whatever that looks like. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think that you're two different people, and you can't expect the other person, like you said, you can't expect the other person to completely change to be like you. Like I can't expect you to be super deep and emotional and sensitive. It wouldn't work anyways. Our relationship would be like all over the place.
So emo.
If that was the case. So thank God that you're not. But you can't expect the other person to be like you. But yeah, like you said, like you just have to practice empathy, see what one another's needs are. And I think that like as somebody who is extremely sensitive and a feeler, that you just have to understand that the other person, they're not going to feel to the same degree that you are, and you can't get frustrated by that. It's just how they're wired. Because if you expect them to come back with the same amount of feeling, you're not going to get it, and you're going to get frustrated. Because I know that I've heard that people are like, I just want them to like engage in the same way with like the same amount of depth and feeling, and they get frustrated, and it's not going to happen.
Yeah. I think it's super important to ask this question. How important is this to you on a scale of 1 to 10? You know, because I can't gauge how important something is to her, how deeply she's feeling it, and she can't for me. And so asking that question of like, help me understand like how significant this is for you emotionally. Even something like that can give you clarity. Because if I ask her that, she's like, this is like a 9 out of 10 for me. I'm like, oh, dang, it's like a 3 out of 10 for me. Okay, so this must mean a lot to you. Okay, how can I support you? How can I come alongside you in this way? Right? So I think that's all for that.
I think, one more
thing. Go ahead.
thing.
Yeah, give her.
That if the person who's on the more surface level could just do your best to put yourself in the other person's shoes who's more sensitive. It might be hard because you don't feel the same way that they do. You don't feel to the depth that they do. You just like don't get it. You don't have to fully understand it also at the end of the day, but to just try. So don't just be like, this is how I am. I don't feel, I don't like, just keeping it really surface. Don't write yourself off like that, and show your spouse that you are trying to understand and that you do feel, even if you just share a little bit of how you're feeling, or try and work on expressing maybe one word descriptor of what you're feeling. That would be helpful for the other person to feel like you're not a robot.
Yeah, I can I add on that? Mm-hmm. I think one big thing here is just letting go of the expectation to fully understand. A lot of my clients I talk to, it's like the great masculine error, and it's not necessarily just for men, but it's this idea that you think that one day you're going to figure out your wife. This idea that one day she's going to make sense to you. If you just work hard enough, if you just do enough, you're just going to get her and get it. But listen, the masculine will always perplex the feminine, right? And it's just the way it is. It will never, it's just how we're wired. And so there's things that you're just never going to understand about your spouse. And so stop trying, right? And there's some things that you will, but just let it go, And I've that's been a huge help for me, is being like, okay, I actually don't get why she's so upset right now, but maybe I don't need to. Maybe it's just my responsibility to create a place of emotional safety for her so she can express how she feels and apologize and reconcile. I don't need to know why, or I don't need to feel it as deeply as she does. So.
Yeah. And the more sensitive person needs to be okay with the other person not fully understanding.
Good.
Like I had to come to a place to be like, he's never going to fully understand the depth to which I'm feeling this, and that's okay.
Good. Hey, we're going to get back to the episode, but while I have you here, I wanted to ask you, would you consider helping a brother who's struggling in his life right now? Maybe it's a guy searching the internet to help save his marriage, his health, or his family. Maybe it's a man that's just behind you on this journey. And we know, statistically speaking, there are thousands of men doing this, and we know that there are probably men in your social circles that are struggling with some of these very same things. If you'd be willing to help, this is how you can help, and I promise it'll take less than 60 seconds. If you've gotten any value from this podcast so far, would you be willing to give us an honest review and subscribe to our channel, whatever channel you're listening on? If you want to take this to the next level, would you consider sending this link to a friend of yours who you know would benefit from listening to this show? Now, why would you do that? Because the more men that hear this content, the more marriages we can save, the more fathers we can help step up, and the more lives that we can change forever. This isn't just for the men. This is for the wives, the children, and the generations to come. So I want to say thank you so much for doing your part to help other men find the support that they need. Now let's get back to it. Number 6. The question is, what is one thing you do proactively to manage marriage or relationship issues? So what's one thing that you do to get ahead or to avoid or to get proactive? Anything that you have to add to that or share about that?
You can start it.
I can start it. Something real practical. There's a couple things. The first thing that's super practical is, before having a sensitive conversation, consider your circumstances. Like, are we both fed? Are we hungry? Are we stressed? Are we tired? Are we overwhelmed? Are we distracted? Okay, so if you're walking into something and you feel like you're not necessarily sure, you feel like an issue might come up, and you want to be proactive, ask yourself that. Have we ate enough? Have we slept? Are we in a good place? Even like if you're a night person and I'm a morning person, are we meeting in the middle, like in the middle of the day? That's a big thing for us. She would bring up things like late at night, and I would bring up things early in the morning, and both of us are like, why are you talking to me about this? I don't want to talk about finances at 6 a.m., or like, I don't want to talk about finances at 9 p.m. And so understanding that, it's just a real practical thing. And the second thing, I think, which is the more emotional thing, is constantly creating, and I alluded to this earlier, but a space of emotional safety, right? And so we can talk about this another time, but I've talked about it in previous episodes. Your wife needs to feel safe. That's one of the 3 basic needs that every wife or every woman has. And under that, safety is financial safety, physical safety, relational safety, and emotional safety. So just like creating a space where your wife is comfortable and confident to talk about whatever's on her mind without feeling like you're going to judge her, shut her down, or belittle her feelings. And if you can both create that space where like home base is like where you want to be, and you just when things go wrong or you're having a hard day, you want to come together and talk. Creating a space of impenetrable emotional safety, I think, has been super impacting for us, and it helps prevent conflict, because now I'm not bracing when I want to talk to her about something. I'm actually embracing her in that way, and I actually can't wait to talk to her about it. Okay, and then just one last thing is understanding the fact that we will change on a fundamental level multiple times through our lives. You know, I know for women and men as well. For women specifically, like marriage, childbirth, menopause, it's like 3 big times in their lives really fundamentally change how they think, changes how they, all that kind of stuff. And so it's so critical to foresee these things and to understand that you will change, and to constantly be having that conversation. How are you feeling? Are you happy? Are you frustrated? Are we good? Are we not? What's one thing that's been bothering you about us lately? What's one thing you love about us lately? One question that I love asking is, how can I love you better? Right? And if you're asking each other that question, hey babe, how can I love you better this week? Or how can I love you better in marriage? Then that's amazing. You're going to be depositing, love into each other that way. And it's going to help you stay together through the changes, because issues will come up, like old issues will come up. You thought you dealt with it, and then, and then it pops back up when something else changes. It's just wrapped in a different bow, or life changes and then new issues come up. But if you have a safe place with one another, and that you can constantly talk about these things, no matter what comes up, you're leaning in versus leaning out when things get rocky. Make sense?
Yeah, makes sense.
If you think it makes sense, I think it makes sense. We think it makes sense. Okay, you know what? It looks like we are actually running out of time. So I think we're going to just do a part 2. I think we're going to do a part 2 and answer a couple more questions for you guys in 2 weeks from now. Okay, so this will be part 1, and then 2 weeks from when this was aired, tune in for part 2, which we're going to answer the rest of the questions about marriage. How's that sound? You want to do that?
Let's do it.
Let's do part 2, Q&A with the Osmonds. I hope you've enjoyed this conversation. And I usually say, like, hey, where can we find you? Where can we find you,
I'm not going
Sam?
to give you my address. You can find me.
You know what? Actually, we're not even going to because I don't want a bunch of dudes just following my wife on Instagram. I'm just kidding. I tag her all the time. If you
I
want
have
to
a
check it out.
private account, so too bad.
You know what? Listen, try to follow her, and if you look like a creep, she's not going to accept it, and just take the cue.
Yeah.
All right. Just kidding. Okay, listen. Have an incredible week, you guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. Check in 2 weeks from now for part 2. Listen, Sam, thank you for being a part of this. It's actually so special.
Oh, thanks.
Appreciate it.
It's really nice to be a part of it.
Love you.
It sounds so ingenuine. I love you too.
Okay, guys. Have a good week. Catch up soon. Wow, what an incredible episode. Listen, if you are watching on YouTube today, I want to hear from you, okay? Leave it in the comments below. What was the big takeaway for you? What was that big aha moment? And let's start the conversation. If you've listened to this episode and you've decided that you want help today, if you need coaching, if you need some resources, feel free to please reach out to me. My email is mitchell@dadnationco.com. My website is dadnationco.com. You can hit me up on Instagram @dadnationco. And I've got a ton of resources for you. I'm here to help you, support you in any way I can, and to serve you in a powerful way. So check those links. I'll have them posted below. But other than that, listen, I'm here for you. I'm in your corner. Have an incredible week. We'll catch up soon.